Hey everyone, you should have just finished reading about your day one with Expensify guide and watching a short video on how to use the mobile app to code expenses and submit reports. I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about a few things that are specific to Victory Life Church and how we use the Expensify system. So number one, you just saw in the video where it would have talked about smart scanning and it talked about scheduled submit. Now we do use the smart scan feature, but the scheduled submit feature we have turned off right now, and we're going to be using manual submissions because we found that the scheduled submit was actually causing additional reports to be created that we did not need. So we've turned that off. One other thing I want to let you know about is on the smart scanning, it's incredibly useful, but just be aware that when you take a picture of a receipt, the smart scanning could take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours, depending on how many requests have been put on the server. So just be aware if it takes a little while, that's okay, that's normal. You can come back later and always finish coding items in. Now, a few things just to give some best practices before I will show you how to do the expense reporting in the system. Just some best practices for you to make Expensify be as useful as possible and to make the submission process fast and easy. I recommend number one, upload a picture of your receipt as soon as you get it. So you get a receipt, pull out your phone, take a picture, and let it upload. Then I recommend at least once a week, set aside 10 minutes and go into the Expensify system and code out the expenses on anything you have submitted during that week. That'll help you once you get to the end of the month and it's time to actually submit your report. You should be very, very close to just honestly going in the system, generating your report, and hitting submit. I will have a separate training that will show you how to do an expense report and show you what it looks like. But doing those practices of taking pictures as soon as you get them, which gives it time to smart scan it, and then taking some time each week, just 10 to 15 minutes, and doing some coding will help you stay on top of things and not get behind. So those are the main things I wanted to cover with you. Now let's flip over on the screen and I'm going to show you Expensify and then let you look at our setup in the system and how to code and submit expenses. After you log into Expensify, you should end up at your inbox. Now my inbox is currently empty because I've addressed all the issues here, but you'll see things show up such as notices asking you to submit your report to your submitters or to code receipts at times. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how to go to the expense area and code an expense. Okay, so once you've clicked on expenses, you should see your screen looking something like this. Now yours could be empty if you've never put a receipt in here. And I want to show you a few things to start off with. First, on the top, there's an area that says Show Filters. If you click on this, you'll get options that will allow you to add some filters to help manage your list of expenses. So you can do things such as search for expenses within inside a certain date range. So if you wanted to look at expenses on your credit card date range of, let's say, 4/29 through 5/28, you could always put that in here and search for your expenses that fall in that date range. You can do things such as search for merchants, and then also one of the areas I use a lot is these quick filters that will show you expenses by category type. So there's categories of unreported, there's open expenses, which will show you anything that is on an expense report currently. There are processing expenses, which these are expenses that are on an expense report that's out for approval, which you can actually see I have some of those out right now. And then there's approved expenses, which this will show you items that were on an expense report and got approved. And then anything that's in a reimbursed status is from an expense that we did a final approval on it and we paid the bill. So those are a quick overview of these statuses of expenses. I'm going to leave mine on unreported because this is probably the best way to build your monthly expense report. So anything that you haven't put on an expense report, you can see it right here, and then you can code these items out, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. Now, another thing I'd like to show you real quick is on the top right, there's an area that says View on it, and by default, Expensify starts you off with this view, what I call kind of the middle bar view, but there's also a condensed view that shows the lines much smaller, and then this third one is my favorite view. It shows you a big picture of the receipt, and down here we'll show you what expense category and any coding you put on the receipt. Now I haven't got any coding on here at this time, and I'm going to show you how to do that in just a second. This last view up here is a pie graph, and it'll just kind of show you a breakdown of what you've spent. So if I go to processing, you'll see this pie graph will change, and it's going to give me a breakdown of how I spent my money on the expenses that fall into the processing category. So that's just some tools you can do to look at your own expenses. I'm going to go back to my favorite view, and I'm going to filter it back down to just the unreported. So at this point, I'm going to show you how to go in here and to finish coding out your expense line item so that it'll be ready to go in a report. So I'm just going to click on the receipt, and right now you'll see Expensify did its magic, and it did what it calls smart scanning. So this particular receipt I got in my email, and I forwarded it to receipts@expensify.com, and at that point Expensify started the smart scanning process. So when it's smart scanning, it looks to find the merchant for you, the date, and the dollar amount to pull off the receipt, and then also it will look for a category that will fit the expense type. Now, a few things to show you before we go into any more of the coding of the expenses. I want to show you number one. Over here on the right is a small view of your receipt. Now you can use your mouse to slide around on the receipt and view it in this window, but if you'd like to view a full screen, you can do a single click on it, and it will bring you up a full screen view of your receipt. So you can scroll, you can always download it or print it from here if you would like to do so. I'm going to hit the X and go back to just my receipt summary view. Some other things I want to show you up here is there's a button called Split Expenses. So if, for example, you went to Walmart and you bought equipment and you bought office supplies, you could hit Split Expense, and then it'll let you break out the expense by line item and dollar amount. So you could say, I'll just start typing equipment purchase, and let's say that was $50, and it'll do the math for you and say the amount you have remaining on your receipt is 67, so let's say that other 67 was office supplies. So you can code it out like that, and then you can hit save, and that will split the expense for you. Now I'm not going to do that right now because I don't want to split this receipt. I'm going to hit the X and go back. The other thing is, if you do split a receipt and you shouldn't have, or you need to fix it, you can always click merge and go pick the other expense that you split off and merge those two back together. And there's some more details on how to do this in the walkthroughs attached. That's in one of the optional reading areas. Okay, so now let's talk about the category. Category, you can think of this as an expense type. So this will be things, again, like equipment. It'll be supplies. And in all these fields, you can just start typing, and it's going to bring up everything that matches the letters you've typed. So for this one in particular, this is a due and subscription for the Expensify software. So I'm going to leave that coded in here. Now the next sections are very, very important. The location, department, purpose, and project. These items directly impact your budgets for your locations and departments. So for instance, this particular expense is a central accounting expense. So I'm going to go to the location and type in central. I'll go to the department and type in accounting. And I'm going to go to the project and type in general, because this is my general operating budget that I'm pulling this from. And lastly, I'll code my purpose. For this particular item, it's a management and general item. But again, if you were doing something like buying communion, that could be a purpose of worship, because it was for worship services. And then you'll always need to add a comment down here. So this was my monthly Expensify statement. And then at this point, if you have reviewed everything, you can hit save. Before I do that though, I want to show you one more thing in here, is this attendees area. So the attendees section is going to be utilized whenever you are coding a travel meal or an entertainment meal. So in that instance, according to our travel policy, you need to list everyone who ate at the meal with you. So you can do that very simply in here. Anybody that's already in the Expensify system will pop up in the drop-down menu. So let's say I had a meal, for instance, with Andrew Cacho. I click on his name, it'll add him to the list. But if I had somebody that is not in the list, such as, let's say, Jim Bob, I can type in his name and then click on it down here, and it'll add him in as an attendee as well. And that's how you can add the people who ate at the meal with you. If you add somebody and you need to take them back off, you can always click on their name down here and it will remove them from the list. So at this point I'm finished coding my receipt. I'm going to hit save, and this will save my changes. You'll see it updated down here in my viewer. I can now see that I've tagged these with Accounting Central. You can also see my comments. And now at this point we will be ready to take these expenses and to make our expense report, which I will show you in our next video. Thank you for watching.